Hey, I'm Father Mark Mary.
I'm Brother Elijah.
And I'm Jackie Mulligan.
We're Franciscan Friars. Jackie helps Franciscan Friars. Good to be back with you. We talked about last week, introduced fasting, kind of went in on the spiritual benefits of it. This week we're gonna kind of unpack what we're actually what it looks like.
Yeah, what do we do? Part of the thing is you can, if you type in intermittent fasting in YouTube or Google or whatever, you get a ton of hits. So it's kind of a little bit all the rage right now, as far as just from the perspective of diet that people have, but we're going to get into more just the nuts and bolts of that. We talked about the spiritual benefits in the last session, so we'll kind of bring that all together and say from the Catholic perspective, this is what we're looking at. Cool.
Yeah, and so in my practice, what I see oftentimes is that people have gut issues, and that when I work with somebody, I'm similar to probably how you would approach listening to a confession or spiritual direction, perhaps. I'm really looking for the holes and the gaps to fill in and to really find the root cause. So oftentimes when we experience things like headaches or digestive issues or fatigue or brain fog, that's just a symptom of the root cause. And so what I see over and over and over again is that the root cause often starts in our gut. And so our gut is our second brain. I actually think it's our first brain and that this is our second brain. But all the good stuff happens in our gut and it's brought up to our brain. So serotonin, dopamine, that's all produced in our guts. And one thing that fasting helps is create space for digestive healing and it rids our body of toxins. So when we take space from eating and allow time for fasting, our bodies literally get to cleanse. And that's something that people may never do in their lives for more than 12 hours. So let's say they eat dinner around 8 p.m., they're probably eating breakfast by 8 a.m. or even sooner. One of the quotes I mentioned earlier that I really use as the foundation of my practice is by St. Augustine, which is treat your body as if you're going to live forever and treat your soul as if you're going to die tomorrow. And so if we're looking at the physical aspects of fasting, it's definitely going to help us live, quote unquote, forever. What would you say the age was that you said was promised by fasting?
St. Anthony lived to 106 years old, so did a lot of fasting.
Yeah. This relief of fatigue, I had Lyme's disease, I still have Lyme's disease, but I was really healing from it a few years ago. And I accidentally had to fast for a doctor's appointment that was at 5 p.m. to get my blood drawn. And I struggled in the morning. I definitely didn't feel well, but afternoon and up until my appointment was the best I had felt in almost a year. And that was because I accidentally fasted. And I had fasted in the past, but since being sick, I had not, thinking that I needed to fuel my body. And it sped up my healing process more than any other remedy that I tried. One of the first things that I see people experience with just a few days of fasting is that they have better sleep and more energy. And this is a very fine line between men and women. Men tend to do better with longer fasts and more fasting, where women generally do better with less hours of fasting, but they can do it consistently. So we'll kind of jump into maybe some of the different types of fasting. When I talk about the different types of fast, it's important for you to tune in and really question why you're drawn to the invitation to fast in general, but also why one particular fast I mentioned might be desirable to you. And so
just to kind of touch on that is, what would be, can you example of just to hit it home, good motivation, bad motivation?
So a positive motivation would be for the intention of potentially ridding brain fog, but also for matching that with a private prayer intention for somebody outside of self. A negative motivation would be sheerly to lose weight or aesthetically look better.
Part of the movement of fasting is I'm reducing other, so it's Pope Benedict XVI has a line that love's an exodus from me to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get more others centered. And if our fasting is really kind of a selfish diet just for me, it has the opposite effect. Right.
It becomes cult of the body really quick.
Exactly.
It's all about my own image, whereas it should have the opposite effect of making me more conscious of how present God is, how much he's calling me to give of myself, and really to mortify, which means put to death, like my inordinate desire for my own immediate gratification and my own self, and etc.
So losing weight could be like a byproduct of it?
For sure, yeah.
But
That's definitely something I see that's frequent result of fasting, but it shouldn't be the main focus point, the main catalyst for deciding to implement fasting in your life.
All right.
Yeah.
So go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so some different types of fasting would be a 24-hour fast, and that would look like you're eating every day still, but that would look like finishing dinner, let's say tonight at 6, and then not eating again at all until tomorrow night at 6 p.m. And when you eat again, when you reintroduce food, you're just having a simple meal. So you're not making up for the lost meals that you didn't have, and you're certainly not overindulging. There's a lot of different science on what to have as far as a reintroduction. That might be a little long for this video, but the quick and basic part of it is that you want to eat whole, natural, real food. I once heard that if your grandmother can recognize the food and pronounce it, then it's a real food, right? So fruits and vegetables, things like that. One of the most popular fasts I think that we see nowadays is the 16-8, where it's 16 hours of fasting and then an 8-hour eating window. And that's something that I see people practice daily and see a lot of health benefits. So say that you skip breakfast and then you start eating around noon, and then you stop eating by 8 p.m. And so that's relatively easy to implement into a lifestyle where you're still conducive with the goings of the world, but you're still kind of creating this space in the morning, especially if it's kind of paired with prayer and morning prayer and mass. It's really, really beautiful. I see a lot of people who will fast on Sundays before mass, and so they'll go to a morning mass, fast through mass, and then have their first meal to literally break bread with a family, which is something traditionally that used to happen that doesn't happen regularly anymore. So there's the 24-hour fast, then there's the 16-8. Fasting definitely is a stressor on the body. So if stress is really high in our lives, physically fasting and abstaining from food may not be the best idea. And so that's why I kind of introduce these virtues of healing, because awareness has to be there. So if it's causing additional stress, there's a difference between suffering and stress. So it's going to be uncomfortable regardless. But we really have to tune in to understand, is this creating more stress in my body and having a negative effect on me, which would result in things like anxiety and fatigue. Those are not benefits of fasting. And that's not a result of a healthy fast. Now, will you feel a little bit fatigued while you're in the fast? Certainly, but it shouldn't be resulting for a long time after that. And then there's different ways to fast with just less food. Brother Elijah and I have had this conversation before where in our experience, we've actually done better and felt better with just completely abstaining from food rather than simply having bread and water or just let's say a fruit and vegetable fast. That tends to spike your blood sugar and kind of put you on this mood roller coaster, blood sugar roller coaster. And another benefit of fasting is really helping with insulin sensitivity and maintaining our blood sugar. So it's not something that I think sometimes having less is actually harder. It definitely keeps us hungry, but I think the body kind of receives a little bit of fuel and then wants even more. So it is an option, but I would guess and even predict that if you were to try that you would end up actually having a harder time rather than if you just only had water.
We've heard about the spiritual benefits of it. We've heard a little bit about just the natural biological benefits of fasting. Like, where do we actually start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think a good place to start is to pray, first of all. So just to have a discerning attitude with it. Just like when you're trying to figure out like a daily schedule for prayer, like what we call an horarium, you pray about that, you discern it. Where's the Lord inviting me to pray? When am I going to be most effective and attentive to His presence, to what He's doing? A lot of people like the morning or the evening, but those are all questions that you ask when you're trying to come up with like a daily prayer schedule. Same thing with fasting is like, am I being called to have like a weekly schedule of fasting? Should I be fasting one day a week? And I find that like beginning with one day a week is like a good testing ground to see like what works with my body, what does well, and then before I begin like increasing it from there. So I just test like, okay, I'm going to try one day a week to do 16 hours of fasting and 18 hours of like the feeding window. So things like that. So like testing it asking those questions in prayer. So I think the first thing is to pray, and if you have a spiritual director, that's the right place to do that. If you don't, then a trusted friend who you feel, is a little bit further along in the journey and is fasting themselves, a priest, a religious, or just a lay person who is living the faith and is a bit of a mentor for you that you can kind of confide in and bounce it off of. So that's a good place to start, is just prayer, discernment, spiritual direction.
And what I would be looking for if somebody came to me with that, like the desire to kind of go a little bit more intense with fasting is number one, just checking the motivation to make sure it's not like a pure sort of like worldly asceticism.
Right.
Like I want to do something hard and to like just to do something,
like flexing spiritual muscle.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of where awareness comes in, is like really understanding if you feel this call, an invitation to fasting, and I just said a 24-hour fast, and the response was, oh, I can do that right away and maybe do 2 days. Put the brakes on, because we need to start slowly. And what Brother Elijah said was perfect, is maybe just starting off with potentially just skipping breakfast one day a week, and then the next week, Our Lady calls us to fast on Wednesdays and Fridays, so potentially aligning our fast with intention on these specific days where we could start with fasting from breakfast, then potentially the next week breakfast and lunch, and simply having dinner. But it has to be something that you slowly do and that's truly aligned. And as we know, sometimes the answers come really quickly, but sometimes the Lord is a little bit slower to reveal what He's asking of us and how He's asking of us. And so creating just a little bit of space for that by not eating breakfast and inviting Him into more prayer time will certainly reveal that over time. So if even just in a month you take 1 or 2 days a week where you skip breakfast alone, that is a great way to start fasting.
Yep. And then I was thinking too, is you mentioned it, is that fasting, there's a certain level of stress it brings to the body, which can also happen to sort of like the powers of the soul. And so again, like spiritually, we want to make sure you're kind of at like a healthy enough place that this kind of privation doesn't make you kind of particularly vulnerable to sin.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have to be, so like just fasting on its own, it has to be coupled with prayer. And so like if you're not at a point where you're praying on a daily basis, which by that I mean like quiet time with the Lord for at least like 20 minutes, half an hour every day, then you want to be a little bit more cautious, and you want to maybe couple. If I'm gonna fast from breakfast, for example, for this week, instead of eating breakfast, I'm gonna take that 20 minutes and pray silently. Or I'm going to go to Mass and spend 10 minutes after Mass in Thanksgiving for the Eucharist, So it has to be coupled with that. So that's that added discernment piece where it's, okay, what am I called to do or test with the fasting? And what does that look like for my prayer life? But I would say this, like, I think sometimes because we don't want to do it, because it's uncomfortable, and because we generally like to be comfortable, like where we're at, we can come up with like a million reasons why, maybe you shouldn't. But ultimately, I think it's one of those things that once you step into it and you try it, prudently, etc., it's not going to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes, and you're going to learn from that. And that prudence will increase where you recognize what's the right amount for me and what's the Lord asking. But ultimately, if the desire is there, the Father has placed that good desire on your heart. Like if the desire is good and it is to fast in order to create more space for Him, to love Him, to die to self, etc., then He doesn't put the desire there to not satisfy it. He's a good Father. So every good desire, holy desire that He puts on our heart, He wants to be the fulfillment, and He wants to bring it about. So I think, yes, caution, but also yes, coraggio. Courage, like go for it, be not afraid.
All right, so we've prayed about it, we've talked to somebody about it, the desire's there.
Yeah.
I think clearance with a medical practitioner is definitely something that we should do, especially if you're doing it for physical healing. I would definitely consult a physician about that. And then I think it's really getting unclear on intention, right? So really saying, okay, I know I want to do this to create intimacy with the Lord. I know I may want to do this for physical healing, but I want to come outside of myself and offer this fast up for somebody else, for the intention of something outside of myself. So, kind of praying about the fast, seeking guidance and permission to do so, really gaining clarity on length and purpose of the fast. And then it's grabbing an accountability partner.
Yep.
And just like we would in inviting somebody into our faith, into our prayer life, it actually is a really beautiful invitation to invite somebody else in to practice fasting with us, And usually the hardest part of the fast, which is sometimes at the end, is when the most beautiful fruits come. And so it's when you're pushing through those last 4 hours and sitting in prayer and kind of going through the agony in the garden, what it feels like, it's just the most beautiful fruits from that time. And that's where we're the most tempted to come out of the fast and kind of talk ourselves into, it's okay to eat, it's okay to come out of this. And so really having accountability there prayerfully also to hold you committed to what you've just discerned to do.
Just the word that kind of comes to mind is be still and know that I am God, from Psalm 46. And fasting has that effect of making our bodies still. And I think that this is one aspect that kind of the world, when it comes to intermittent fasting and water fasting and all of the rage or whatever, misses, is they kind of see it as like, okay, I'm fasting so I get more physical energy so I can do more. Mm-hmm. And we're saying, okay, let's take the energy that we experience biologically from fasting and let's order it towards God, towards love, towards intimacy. And that requires that being still before the Lord, that we might know that He is God.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty good. Good word. So beautiful. We're going to pray about it. We're going to talk to spiritual mentor, spiritual director.
Yep.
Get doctor clearance.
Get a partner. Get somebody in it with you.
And pair it with an intention.
And then
and then go for
Commit
it.
and go.
And then be hard. I mean,
go for it.
Be smart, but like,
Mm-hmm.
what was the word you said? That
Coraggio, yeah.
It sounds cool in
It's
another
Italian.
language. All right. We thank you for watching. Brother Elijah, Jackie, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you again next week. God bless y'all. Peace.
Bye.
Peace.